Hey, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and I'm very happy to be here today for our Friday Frontliner with our very special guest, Andrew J. Graff. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Glad to be here.
What is the J for, by the way?
Jared.
Excellent. Good answer. True or not, doesn't matter. You're a fiction writer. Good. I also have a middle initial J. I'm a Jorg, which is a Norwegian thing. But yes, the J in the middle is very on point, I think. So welcome to The Blaze, everybody. If you are a repeat Blazer, welcome back to The Blaze. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. We are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers who started linking authors and their readers in the age of COVID and now well beyond. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we are ubiquitous. And if you like what you see here, please consider giving us a like or a follow on any of those platforms and sign up for our newsletter at www.amightyblaze.com. You will never have literary FOMO ever again. No more FOMO. Nobody likes that. And today I am coming to you live from beautiful Maine, where I'm at a writer's retreat at the house of our producer, Chuck Garabedian, who is producing from downstairs. So we are all working writers here at The Blaze. And I also engineered this so that I could be in a sort of northern looking place for Andrew's book, True North, which we are here to talk about today. It's not the season for whitewater rafting unless you're really, really avid, but I decided at least we could have a lake and some water and some pine trees, which is very on brand for your wonderful book.
It's perfect.
Thank you, Chuck, for providing the setting that I come to as much as possible. Okay, I'm going to read Andrew's bio, and then we can start talking about True North. So you ready for your bio, Andrew?
Ready.
Are you an Andy or an Andrew?
I go by Andy, but you can call me either.
Okay, I'll call you Jay. I'll call you Jared. No, that's creepy. I won't. I'll call you Andy. Yeah. Okay, good.
Andy's great.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Andrew J. Graff, according to his bio, is the author of RAFT of Stars and grew up fishing, hiking, and hunting in Wisconsin's Northwoods. After a tour of duty in Afghanistan, Graff earned an MFA from the University of Iowa. We have an Iowa grad in the house here as well who's taking a nap downstairs. Big nappers, you Iowa people, you writers. He lives in Ohio and teaches at Wittenberg University, and you're joining us from Ohio today, right?
I am.
Yeah. Where is Wittenberg? I should know this. I went to Kenyon, so I should know this.
It's in Springfield, Ohio, about 20 minutes east of Dayton.
Okay, I actually know where this is. All Ohioans, welcome. Hello, hello. Say hi in the chat. And if you have questions and comments for Andy or for me, let us know. Say hi. Hello, Robin.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, hello. Okay, so tell us about True North. How can you describe the novel in your own words? Give us an elevator pitch.
Yeah. True North is a story about a family. And it's a story about a whitewater river. It's a story of a marriage. And it's a story about a last-ditch effort to save all of it. So in the spring of 1993, Sam and Swami, the two point-of-view characters, load their young children into a 26-foot Winnebago Brave and go up Highway 41 to the Northwoods to Marigami County, where they just bought the deed to Woodchuck Rafting Company, a small failing whitewater rafting company owned by Sam's uncle Chip. So it is overall, I think, a story of expectations versus reality, right? So Sam and Swami hit some walls immediately in the family, in the business, in the Northwoods. But the first thing they hit is a deer with their camper van. So they get off to a rough start, and it's ultimately a story of can this family pull it together by August. So
that was a beautiful description that backed a lot into a small space. I have many questions about this already. The first being, where do you get the names? I love Swami's name so much, and I'm terrible with naming my characters. I often name them after real people as placeholders, then forget to change the names. And then I'm reminded when my friends say, oh, my name is in your book. Why is it? But the names were, as somebody who has family in Minnesota, were so on point, like Swami and Chip. And so I'm wondering where you got Swami's name in particular.
Yeah, so there's two point of view characters, Sam and Swami, and Sam is the daydreamer. He's the one with the big vision to like, okay, we're in financial trouble. Our marriage is sort of on the rocks. How do I save it? Let's cash in and like all get in a camper together and buy a failing whitewater company, right?
As one does, yes.
Yeah, he has that impulse. Now his intentions are good because he and Swami met as river guides back in the day in West Virginia during sort of the dawn of the whitewater industry. Swami, however, is the practical one, right? Sam studied ceramics in college, and Swami studied geology. So she knows how rocks are supposed to be layered. Sam knows about making clay ashtrays, you know? And Swami's name came from Swami's surf break off the coast of California. So her father, I was interested in the impulse to like pack it up and go all in from Sam. And I think it's an impulse that a lot of people can relate to, but they might not actually want to leap into. So Swami's father did it back in the 60s and packed up the family in a Volkswagen hippie bus to go be a surf family, and it wrecked him. So she's understandingly fearful of this leap. You know, it's a leap that I share. I've often, I've been a whitewater guide. I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit for about 20 years, but I've often daydreamed about buying a little whitewater company and living like, van life with my family, my wife and young kids. So True North, though, was a way to do that, like without actually destroying my real family.
Well done. See, there are perks. Hi, Anissa. It's lovely to see you back on the Blaze. Anissa is our regular party girl on Friday and on other interviews. She's so great.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing about fiction. We talk a lot about armchair travel, but I feel like writing fiction offers you an armchair life, and every book offers you a different life, so that you can be in the camper van with your family rescuing a whitewater operation, or you can do all the things that you would never do in real life if you're writing a villainous antagonist, right? Yeah. Or at least one hopes you wouldn't. That sort of siphons off the impulse. But I think it's so right what you're saying about many of us have the impulse to throw up our hands and go just do something else, like go live in the Yukon, or just I'm going to go do this crazy thing and never come back. I used to say, if I can't get published, I'm going to move to Nebraska and be a truck stop waitress, and that's going to be my whole life. Nice. And then, I was a terrible waitress, but many people were spared because I actually could become a writer. I didn't dump coffee into people's laps because of this fate. But I feel as though we have the idea, but we don't have to deal with the consequences because we just have the idea and we don't actually do it. Yeah. And in True North, Swami understands the consequences as a child, and Sam discovers them as an adult. So I think that's such a great way to describe the book. Where did you get the idea for this novel? I always ask this. It's such a question in some ways, but as a writer, I often get ideas for novels from scenes that persist. Like little scraps of a scene. Like it could be somebody driving somewhere and just the quality of light in the car. And for some reason, I carry that around for 3 years until I finally pull on that string. And then the whole book sort of knits itself out of the scene. But for other writers, it's such a different process. Where did the idea for True North come from?
I love that. I love the idea of scenes that stick. I can think of some scenes that stuck for a while before I started writing True North. I know that I wanted, so one reason is it was an experiment in my own life and an opportunity to tie together threads of I'm a raft guide in the summers, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. So let's explore all of that, right? It's kind of the landscape of my preoccupations, as Marilyn Robinson used to say. As far as scenes go that stuck, I had an idea that I wanted this husband and wife to end up in a raft together, charging through like some beautiful, big, post rainstorm numinous floodwater, right? Like I just wanted this triumphant underwater coming up, breaching, and knowing we've made it. Like I had that sort of climax moment in mind, and eventually I was able to work toward it. I have a specific memory of Piers Gorge. That's where this takes place. I guided there for about 9 seasons, in between winters in college, and then summers off teaching. And I have a specific memory of a friend and I guided it in very, very high water. We were out there, and there was a lot of rain, and the waters were rising and rising, and it was rising to the point that we were thinking of calling the trip. And I remember everyone was standing on shore watching this rumbling river, and one of the lead guides said, "What do you guys think? Should we call this?" A couple of boats had already tried, and they'd flipped. And I was ready to say, like, "Yep, call it, dude. I'm ready for warm clothes, you know." But my friend, he said, "Do you know what I think? I think we've got 30 people here who paid to go rafting." And I was like, no. So he and I ended up guiding it together, and I have a photograph of it, but going down into this massive pit in the water, and the boat was completely submarined. And that moment when I think I'm going to float out of this thing. And then just then the boat breaches, and we came up, and it was just river glory, you know? I wanted that for this husband and wife. Yeah.
Were you like, like, do you make like river glory yell when you come up out of a pit like that?
Huge river glory yell. Yeah. Both he and I stood up in the back of the boat and just bellowed Thanksgiving, you know? So
I didn't want to hear that. I want to hear like a moosey, like,
yeah. Come rafting with me, and I'll bellow.
I would do that in a second. I was talking with my friend Trisha as we drove up here about how I like to do physically challenging things. I'm a storm chaser, so I'll take you storm chasing if you want. If you take me whitewater rafting, that sounds
deal. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Geography too, right? That'll be really fun. Thank you. Yeah. You guys all saw that, so this is all recorded. So we're gonna amazing. What was the? I want to ask you about your history with whitewater raft guiding as well. But what is the scariest moment that you've had rafting?
Oh wow, yeah. So I've guided for about 20 years. I started right after I got out of the military. I came home. I enrolled in college, and I was floating in a kayak downstream of this local rapids. And some of my friends had become river guides, and so I got on board. There have been many bad swims, hitting the bottom of the river, getting my legs shaved by river rocks. I remember one in particular that scared me a bit. This was when I was training in on the New River in West Virginia. So I moved to Ohio. Now I guide down near Beckley, West Virginia on the New, and then just this fall on the Gully River, which is, I can talk about that later.
I would love it.
But I did take one swim. So if you go through what's called a hydraulic, one of those sideways whirlpools where the water just flows like this, if you fall in there, you have to go down before you can come up. So you have to curl up like a turtle as a little cannonball and sink down beneath the swirling water so that the hard current can push you out downstream. And that's a long wait. So we were in training. This guy was taking the boat sideways toward a hydraulic. I was like, this isn't good. And we tipped up, and I saw myself falling into the actual crease of this hydraulic. And I just thought, time for a cannonball, So I just buckled up, and I remember feeling myself literally bonking against the river bottom, like against my head, against my hip, just getting sort of slowly tumbled. And there came a point when I remember thinking, like, this has been a while. Bonk, bonk, I'm not, and should I start worrying now? But eventually I lifted my hands up and floated, and there was the boat. I came up right underneath the raft. So turned out good. I guess that's not super scary. There have definitely been more tense moments than that and harder moments. But those swims along the river bottom are memories that stick.
Yeah, I kind of held my breath that whole story.
Mm.
And I think I was subconsciously trying to see if I could hold my breath for the amount of time it takes to be in a hydraulic swim. Is that what you call it, a hydraulic swim? Yeah, that does sound terrifying to me as somebody who has been body surfing and dumped a couple of times. When you get twisted and tumbled and you can't get up to where there is air, those times stick with you, right? But what I'm struck by in your story is that you had the presence of mind to do a couple of things. And one is, okay, I'm going to do a cannonball now when you see this thing coming at you. Yeah. And the other is like, well, it's been a while. Should I be worried that I'm running out of breath? Like, are you always able to maintain your presence of thought when you're in physical danger like that?
I think in those moments, things seem to slow down so much the way they do for all of us. I think it's just part of the fight or flight response, like if you've ever been up on a ladder and it starts to tip a little bit and everything just goes slow motion. Our athletes talk about this a lot, being able to see things slowly in the heat of moments. Yeah, I'm always amazed at the clarity of thought that can occur while bonking along the bottom of a river, like really long, slow conversations with myself. So in my last book, Raft of Stars, the Sheriff Cal takes a bad swim along the bottom of a river. And I had him figure out some things about his life down there, and it didn't seem unrealistic at all. I'm like, no, that's the perfect place for him to like come to a realization about his dad right there, Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I absolutely love whitewater for a variety of reasons, the metaphors it gives. But what I really like about it is, and I share this with my guests, they're coming from busy work weeks and they go out for a weekend of fun. And I just tell them like the best thing about going down a waterfall is you're not going to think about much else. You're just present. Yes, you can have clarity of thought and you can enjoy it and you can be very present, but you're not thinking about taxes or mowing that lawn or how your tires need rotating or any of the normal stresses of life. You're just alive in a canyon with a rubber boat yelling. Yeah. And I would say that it's, as an industry, like it's a lot safe. Yes, it can be dangerous, but it's a lot safer than people may think. Going whitewater rafting. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say it's much safer than the publishing industry.
No. Yeah. It's safer than driving, everything like this. So, yeah, but swims can happen. So if you don't like swimming, it's not a good activity.
Not liking getting wet. I'm recalculating this. And one of the great things about storm chasing is if you get wet, you're in the wrong place. So,
Wow.
I might be in danger, but try. But there is that feeling of you are not able to think about anything else. It is you and nature. And it's a deliciously humbling experience, especially for those of us who spend a lot of our lives in our heads and like who doesn't. So one of the things I loved about True North is that I felt like I had the experience of whitewater rafting, A, without getting wet, but B, without having it smushed in my face. And I think that's a very tough thing to do when you're writing about a highly technical sport, to be able to convey a sense of that to your reader without it taking away from the narrative. So how did you do that? And how much thought did you give it in the writing?
Yeah. Well, I think I was probably in danger of like smushing it too much just because I love it. It was really tempting for me to like describe different moves raft guides can make out in the river and do them at length, and Z-drags and rescues and all this kind of jazz.
Z-drag. What is a Z-drag? Okay, now I need to know.
Sure. A Z-drag is when you need more force on a rope. Like if you get a boat pinned, then you can set up some mechanical force. I don't understand mechanical force because I'm an English major, but I know it works. You go from the object out to an anchor, and then you tie a prusik, and then you pull the rope, and you're basically setting up mechanical pulleys.
Okay.
So you can by yourself lift an entire raft off a rock with a Z drag.
Okay, I could do that. You
Yeah.
guys are witnessing the birth of like a nascent whitewater rafter.
Totally.
Right? Yeah, no problem. Okay, so
yeah, just be like, whatever. I did a Z drag.
I'm damn. I lifted a whole raft with my little rope. So, and by the way, those of you watching at home who are not writers, who are wonderful avid readers, again, thank you. But you should know that smooshing is the technical writer term for putting too much research into your draft. You smoosh it in there, smooshing, and you have to comb out the smoosh, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what we would say. So yeah, so you were in danger of smooshing, but did you avoid the smoosh? And
with the help of like a really excellent editor who said, I can tell you really love this stuff, but right, like, be careful to put in too much, or be careful not to put in too much. So, yeah, I pulled back a bit, and the thing that was helpful is that a lot of the experience is universal, even if you don't like boats, and again, this has to do with some of the metaphors I think that rivers can provide. Some of the terminology that happens out in the river is like, oh, that makes a ton of sense in terms of like marriage too, right?
Yeah, tell us about that like equation between like the whitewater rafting and the marriage, because I mean, obviously we all get in like hot water, right? Or we think about the rapids versus like the less turbulent places. That's a metaphor for life, obviously. But if you had to choose a metaphor for Sam and Swami's marriage from the river, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that both of them are learning to yield instead of control outcomes.
Beautiful.
So one of the biggest, and I've shared this a lot, but I never get tired of seeing it happen on the river, is that the old salt river guides who've been at it for like 20, 30 years have learned flow. And the rookie river guides are just all muscle and panic, right? So someone who's brand new out there, they will paddle so hard, they'll overcorrect, they'll throw out their shoulders, they'll have to readjust in the rapid. And the whole rapid, they're just working way too hard. And that sort of reminds me of like my 20s, of like, I will now shape the cosmos the way I wish it was and exhaust myself and throw out my figurative shoulder doing so. We get humiliated enough times or disappointed enough times that we learn, I think, like, oh, I have to learn to flow. I have to learn to yield to the river, to co-labor with what actually is. Yes, there's times we need to paddle so hard, but there's also a time for yielding. The old salt river guides, the old gully guides down in West Virginia, I've watched them in slow motion video. I actually put a scene in the book where these rookies see some video footage of an experienced guide, and they're like, "What? How does she do that?" Because I've seen them go through class 5 rapids with house-sized explosions, taking maybe 2 or 3 strokes, and just looking as calm as if they're enjoying lunch. So yielding, flow. I think that's what Swami and Sam are sort of after, and maybe they're on different sides of that. I think Sam sort of yields too much, right? He's like, "Hey, I got a plan," and then he crumbles pretty easily when that plan starts to fall apart. So Sam, I think, has to learn how. If I would place them simply in that metaphor, Sam has to learn how to paddle and get it together. And I think Swami needed to learn to yield a bit. I mean, she was in a hard spot, no doubt about it. But her answer was, I will now wrestle this into the shape it needs to be. And that didn't work great either, So by the end of the story, I think both of them are reaching a new balance.
That's beautiful. It's very yogic, actually, I feel like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What do you mean?
Sorry. As soon as I said that, I was like, well, the universe doesn't want me to answer that. I think, excuse me, I think it mostly is you have to sort of take your own temperature every day when you're doing something physical in this way, whether you're doing yoga, which I just started doing, or whether you're doing whitewater rafting. If you're storm chasing, you have to take the temperature of the atmosphere, literally and figuratively. And you have to let go of your idea of how you thought it was going to be to adjust to what it actually is. And every day it fluctuates a little bit, right?
Nice.
So it can be applied to just about everything, but it reminds me of a sort of an attitude of radical acceptance that I think all of your characters come to.
Right on. I'm interested in that. I think in my last book, there was a character, a grandfather. His name was Teddy, and he was asked at one point by Sheriff Cal in the forest, like, how did you keep going? You know, Teddy described his life as a father and a farmer, and he didn't never wanted to be a farmer, but he had to, because he has got his daughter and his wife and a family to take care of, and himself. And the younger guy wanted to know, like, how'd you do it? And he said, I just didn't light the match. Like, sometimes you just suffer when you need to, and you don't make it worse. And that's as good as it can get sometimes. And I was like, dang, Teddy, tell me more, you know? So I wanted to explore that too, the idea of being long suffering. And your idea of radical acceptance, I think, has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with stepping out of, you know, my 20s into my 40s, where hopefully I can accept, yield, flow better, you know, throw out my shoulder less. And part of that is acceptance, and part of that is the acceptance of suffering in a way. And in this way, in their marriage, in their business, it's really hard. Who's going to yield? You know, there's pride involved, there's hurt involved. Yeah. They have to take the temperature. So
I cannot think of a partnership in the world that doesn't involve some sort of pride battle or suffering battle. I mean, the benefits that you get from your partnerships obviously override that, but because people are people, there isn't, I don't think, any sort of relationship in which you don't have those battles in some way, the intimate ones anyway. What you're saying reminds me also of this thing I learned in a meditation class, and then I'll start talking about all my woo-woo Jenna stuff.
No, please go woo. That's great.
Yeah, we're gonna go deep woo here, people. But they talk about a condition, like you're in a certain condition every day, right? You're in a hungry condition, or you're tired, or I just had a shingles shot, I was in a terrible condition, or whatever. So you are like in this state. And then that's the first arrow, they call it. Like, that's your condition. It's just something that is stuck in you that day. But the second arrow is the thing that you stick in yourself, telling yourself whether that condition is good or bad. So if you're suffering because it's your time to suffer, or you have to suffer, let's say you lose somebody you love, like saying, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of this. Or, you know, my husband is packing us all into a camper van and driving us to this dinky whitewater place with his Uncle Chip. Oh my God, what the F?
Yeah.
You know, this is terrible. This is terrible is the second arrow. And so I feel like Swami in True North has a little bit more arrows in her quiver than Sam probably does. Sam maybe goes with the flow, as you said, a little bit too much, but she has like a lot of ideas about whether things are good or bad. And so she's trying to figure out like how to unstick those arrows. I mean, this like, it's such a, who knew this was like such a woo book, but it really is. It does offer these beautiful metaphors for life, for partnership. And yet it is, as I said before, like beautifully tangible without being overly research smooshed. So you get a really great sense of action. You get a really visceral sense of Wisconsin, which I loved, of the setting. And I wanted to ask you about this as, you know, a girl who always has one foot in the Midwest. I love the Midwest. I miss it. I'm wondering if you can talk about the setting of the novel. Obviously, I would say, as a guest, dear to you, this place.
Yeah, it is a place that's dear to me. So when I finished writing Raft of Stars, I knew I wanted to write about the North still, and the people and the places and the forests and the rivers. So both of these books take place in the same fictional county of Marigami County. And I like the fictional county because if I need to, I can make the woods a bit bigger or the waterfalls a bit steeper or what have you. But this one, even though it's a fictional county and it takes place in the town of Thunderwater, which is a fictional town, the river is a real space. So Woodchuck Rafting Company rafts on Piers Gorge in the book. And that's a real stretch of whitewater. And that was the stretch of whitewater that I learned to guide on. It's on the border between Niagara, Wisconsin and Norway, Michigan. And I grew up there as a kid, like a mile away. So we would grab our fishing poles and ride our bikes down there and just spend hours hanging out by these big rapids and these whirlpools and beautiful, beautiful, clean, like tea-colored water. I love it. It's my favorite place on earth. So when I started, I always wanted to write about the river, and in particular that spot. And like when I tried to name it something else in the early drafts, I was just like, no, it's Piers Gorge, man. And I just wanted to sort of honor it. Like there's a really real space. So someone could read the description of Piers Gorge, even down to the names of the rapids and the way they move, and they could take a hike there and just name it, exactly the way Uncle Chip describes it as he's pointing out the rapids. So that felt really nice to put that in a book. Yeah.
I love that. One of the things that I love about being a writer is that you do get to honor places and people who are gone, and places that still exist but might be gone, like Piers Gorge, I imagine, is sort of under threat by climate change. There's a little hint of that in the book, even though it takes place in 1993, but the landscape is literally shifting as the characters navigate it. And yes, tea-colored water is beautiful. Sylvia, you're totally right. If you get True North, you will read many such descriptions. You will be so happy. You will eat beautiful description all day, every day, reading this book. But yeah, one of the things that I love about writing is that you get to encode your love for things in a book and preserve it. And then you give it to readers who hopefully remember it as if they had lived it. And that to me it's such an honor.
Man, I was just talking about that today in class. Like if we do our job well as writers, like building a really concrete world, we're building a livable experience, right? Giving someone the raw materials of knowledge, like smell this, taste this, feel these rocks on your skin, and if we do our job well, it's an experience as real as their 10th birthday party, so I love the idea of like embedding your what you love in there. It's like this gift. It's this big potent gift that you're trying to give, and you know this much better than I do. I've written 2 books, right? But the idea, like you write the thing, you give it, and then you hope it's accepted. Like you're just like, please like my present because I love it so much. I really do love what I wrote about. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing more gratifying than something that you put in a book that you encoded as yours that the reader might not necessarily know. Is like my childhood house is in my first book. We had banisters with like hearts carved in the banisters, and window seats and doors that went nowhere, and like a weird maid staircase, and all of that is in that book embedded in there. And people sometimes say to me, I have dreams about that house. And I just think, wow, it's somehow, I just gave myself goosebumps, haha, but like somehow, the thing that I love got transposed into somebody else's dream. It probably doesn't look quite the same, and it doesn't even matter. It's just the fact that we get to do this for a living. Is the best form of practical magic, I feel.
That is so good. I was sitting at the dinner table the other day with my kids. We were having lunch, and I was telling them stories about their great grandpa. He was hilarious. He was a funny German man, and he used to just have our whole family just bowled over in laughter around dinner tables or barbecues or whatever. So I was telling them a story about some of the things he did, and they were just cracking up. And I'm like, man, he's been passed away for some time. And I just thought, like, how beautiful. Like, Grandpa, your jokes still work on 6-year-olds. Yeah, it's handed on.
I love that.
Same as hearts and banisters. That's awesome.
Now they're yours, and your grandpa can be mine. I exchange. I'll talk in class about the grandfather, and you can talk about the hearts. And that's how it goes. You share the stuff with each other, and then other people know it, and it gets passed on.
Yeah, that's neat.
So lucky students you have. Speaking of grandparents and people who make you laugh, one of my dear friends who is our thoughtful bro on A Mighty Blaze, Mark Cecil, has coined this new term that he has for when he reads. He says he has secondary character blindness. He's like, I follow the protagonist. It's all I can do. I'm like a truffle ham with the protagonist. And I am like the opposite. I love the secondary characters, or who I think of as like the best supporting actors in any like sort of mind movie of the book. Like,
yes.
To me, they can sort of make or break the book, especially in terms of comedy. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the secondary characters, the best supporting actors in True North.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you on that one. I love the humorous secondary character who makes small appearances in the movie, but also can push the plot forward in huge ways. The secondary characters here, yeah, we've got Sam and Swami. They have 3 kids. So Darren, 10, Dell, 4, and Dee Dee, an infant, are their children. They all show up pretty strongly in the book. And then the other thing was the raft guides. So I knew I wanted to write about rivers, but I also knew, I was like, oh man, I want to write about river guides. Because whitewater rafting is sort of like this inland surf culture. Like there's real characters in it. And I was thinking, I read Mark Twain's Life on the Mississippi, and he was talking about how, like the river crews that would like raft logs up and down the Mississippi and the Ohio. It was such a rich space, but Twain was like, no one's told their story. No one's written about it. He described those guys as sitting out on the rafts of logs at night, playing fiddles and drinking whiskey and doing jigs. And I thought to myself, those are river guides. Those are whitewater raft guides, straight up 200 years later, So it was really fun to bring in the raft guides. You got Uncle Chip. He's sort of like the old stoned sage, the old salt who is definitely past his prime physically, but nobody can read that river like he can. He knows it like it's described in the book like an old couple. He moves up and down the riverbank as if holding hands with a spouse of many years. And then you got Moon. She's sort of like the river hippie mystic. And she was super fun to write. She makes a bunch of great food and lives in a teardrop trailer and is a really free spirit and a heck of a river guide. And then you've got Randy, and he's sort of like the local boy, so he's all Northwoods, Wisconsin. But he's also a raft guide. So in the back of his truck, it's 1993. In his truck rack, he does have a rifle, but he also has a canoe paddle, so both things are there. These characters were really, really fun to write. And I would say like a really behind the scenes character that I really grew to love was Birdie, who owns the local hardware store.
Oh my God. Yeah. She's a trip.
Yeah. Super fun stories to tell, Swami shows up at the hardware store just looking for paint. And she gets this big, long story from Birdie about, having to shoot a black bear who broke into his house when he and his wife were newlyweds. And there's this big tall tale that he spins, and Swami can tell, man, you've spun this tale for your grandkids too. He knew how to tell it. That was really fun to write. So yeah, all of those raft guides, I loved each one of them. And the fun thing is, you can go to any river company in North America, and you will be able to say, that's the Chip, that's the Moon, that's the Randy. Like they're at all of them,
I love that. I love the comments that people are making too. Kirsten said to me, the secondary characters are like the color palette in a painting and provide the texture and the mood. And I think that's true. I also like my secondary characters often provide the humor. Because my protagonist, sorry, I'm like shifting around because I'm sitting on a bed and I'm old. My my secondary characters provide the humor because the protagonists are always going through some dark night of the soul that they need to endure, but the secondary characters are like the mouthy ones, and they sometimes get to make great speeches where you're like, where did that come from? And then they stay, and it's like they are the grace notes. I think we have many good questions from our audience. We might have to sort of lightning round them a little bit, but let's start with Anissa, who asks, when do you write? And do you have any objects that you need on your writing space to write? Anissa, do you have like writer cam on? I have recently developed, because I've been working on something new, like a fetish with my Cheryl Strayed write like a mother beep mug. That when I'm writing, I have to use that mug. So yeah, what about you, Andy? When do you write, and do you have any little writer fetish objects?
No, I was gonna say coffee, and here's my mug. It's a beat up Yeti that my kids gave me. It's like my favorite object on the planet. So that's mine. Yeah.
Yep. That's work. How much coffee do you drink when you're writing per day?
When I wrote True North, it was a really early morning thing, and only about an hour and a half a day tops is all I wrote, because then it was off to work or teach, or the kids would wake up. So as much coffee as I can drink in an hour and a half. That's my answer. 6 a.m. Just put it down.
That sounds like a challenge. I could drink a lot of coffee in an hour and a half.
Yeah. Sometimes it was too much.
Yeah, I could drink at least a pot and a half of coffee. And I want to return to Anissa's question, when do you write? But I'm going to get Trisha's next. Did you read a lot of adventure and action books when you were a kid? It's a great question, T.
Yeah, definitely. And I grew up at the end of a dead end road, in the township of a village, and we had 80 acres and a barn, and I had a dog and two brothers. I was the youngest. So we were all readers, and I definitely remember loving books like Hatchet, My Side of the Mountain, things along these lines. But it was also just a ton of daydreaming, like entertaining myself in a hay barn for an afternoon, building forts, daydreaming, walking through the woods. So yeah, I was always a big daydreamer, and I definitely admired outdoor adventure fiction. Yeah. And like survival manuals. Oh my goodness. Yes. Like here's how to make something out of sticks. Wow. Those were fun.
I still read those like I read cookbooks. Like I like to read nonfiction in that way. But the survival manual I will read, and then I think if I'm actually out there having to do this in 3 dimensions, a bear will eat me, or I will fall down the waterfall, or whatever. So I'll have to rely on the kindness of, I don't know, fate, probably. And you said you wrote True North early in the mornings. Was the same true of Raft of Stars? Like, do you have a routine that you adhere to, or is it mostly catch as catch can?
Yeah, catch as catch can, for sure. Raft of Stars, I think I wrote most of it in my office when I had time. True North was on more of a deadline. It was like the first time I had a deadline. My first book, it was like I'm writing this thing, and it's just me and this thing, and no one knows about it. So it took 5 years. True North, I wrote in 3 years, and I did a massive rewrite on it as well. So that was more along the lines of like, all right, like, tighten your laces and get up early. I'm not really a morning person. So to be functional and writing at 6 a.m. was a bit of a lift for me, but I did it, and I did it for months on end every day, and that worked. I actually enjoyed it. The dailiness of it sort of kept everything percolating in my subconscious, I think, in ways that it does not if I'm like, well, I'll write next week or in those couple hours or something.
I think that's right. And my friend Erin Almond and I were talking about this when we were hiking. I'm a big hiker. And I was complaining about how I don't like to write when I'm not feeling inspired, because if I write badly, it just teaches me that I'm writing badly, or that the thing isn't that good. And she said, well, it's interesting, because if I'm working on something every day, I know if I am writing badly that I'm wasting that time, in a sense. Like, I'm writing something that's just going to be scrapped later, but it keeps it front of mind. And I thought, oh, that actually is true. And that's the perk, right? So even if I'm not writing every day, which right now I'm writing every day, but if I am not writing every day, I do what Henry James called the work. So it's like I'm going to sit down and write about what I'm going to write, or I'm researching something, or like anything to stay plugged in and keep it sort of front of mind. But I mean, what you're describing is flow. Oh, sorry, Chuck. Go ahead. Our producer is throwing up another question. This one from Sylvia. Your descriptions are so great. Concur. Do you dream about these scenes during the writing process? Great question. And any talk of movie adaptation? Also a great question.
That is a good question. I don't think I've had dreams about the things that I've written. And now that I say that, I kind of wish I would. Like, that seems like it'd be pretty neat. Jenna, have you had dreams about scenes from your books? Characters?
I literally never have. And I have readers sometimes say I dreamed about this scene or that scene, which I take as the highest compliment because I've infiltrated their subconscious, which is, of course, my nefarious goal. But I think for me, writing fiction is a dream. It's a form of being in a very, very intense dream while I'm writing it, so much so that when I'm sitting and working on a scene and I come out of it, it's discombobulating and sort of bewildering because I've been so deep in this thing that doesn't really exist yet. That's how you build the world that the other people can walk into, right? So I think that dreaming about that might be redundant. I think that's why.
That is such a beautiful answer. Yes.
Thank you. Oh my God, you should be on every week. Let's just talk about writing every week. That would be so great. And tell us about movie or series adaptation for either of your books.
I know they're working on it. Raft of Stars has been optioned, and that's as far as it's gone so far. But they did write a screenplay for Raft of Stars, and it would just be really thrilling. So I'm waiting, just waiting to see.
Bring it on, right? Okay, who would play Sam in the movie? Oh wait, hold on. Let me ask Anissa's question. Then we'll play the casting game. Was this the original title for True North?
No, it wasn't. The original title was the name of the town for the longest time, just Thunderwater.
Thunderwater. Oh my God, I love the name Thunderwater. But I also love the title True North. And why was it changed? Good catch, Anissa. How did you even know that? She's psychic.
Yeah, actually, the titles have been the last things, the sort of cherries on top of the whole editing process, both times, which has been really fun and it's a group effort. Like, let me sit down with other readers and editors and say, like, let's daydream, let's mind this book. That's been really fun for me. Thunderwater, I don't know. I mean, I shared that title with one of my colleagues, and she said, Thunderwater. That reminds me of like some sort of like bathroom appliance or something, like, oh no, not at all. So I think True North is ultimately a better title because it just works on several different levels. It's about these characters trying to find their true north and their relationship and themselves. They're going true north. That was fun to write about, to have Sam describe to his young daughter what true north is. Like, where are we going? Oh, we're going true north, like way up, right? So yeah, it was the last thing that came to be.
Love. It's literal and metaphorical. I think Thunderwater sounds more like alcohol than like a bidet. But
that's what my brother said. Yeah, he was like, yeah. I think he said something like, that's what I call my 7th beer or something. So
great one. Yeah, Wisconsin boy, right? That's so funny. What's more important, title or cover?
Oh, title. And the covers are fun. This one, I was so stoked on this. I love this cover so much.
Let's hold up this cover.
Yes. Oh, when I saw it and the colors and the font and the whitewater raft with the family,
you can see
I was like, I have a book with a raft on it. Thank you. Yeah,
it's always surprising to readers, I think, to know how little input authors usually have on their covers. So when you get a good cover, you're like, oh, it's like that. Sometimes that happens after like several rounds, and sometimes they get it right away.
Cool.
Francine, she loves the cover too, and she can't wait to read the book. Such a fabulous chat. I think that's our cue. I've kept you for almost an hour.
Thank you, Francine.
I told you this would happen once we got writer wonky, but
it went fast. This was fun.
Thank you. I love talking about writing. I love it. I'll do it 24/7 for days. Tell us one last thought you might have for your readers. If you could say anything to your readers, what would it be?
Oh. Thank you so much for trusting me with your time. It takes a long time to read a book. At least it takes me a long time to read a book. And that means a lot. Thank you.
That is beautiful. I could not say anything better than that. Thank you for the gift of your time. Thank you for the gift of your time this afternoon. All of you who are watching, thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again next week. I'll be interviewing Edwin Hill, who is one of my buddies, as well as a great thriller author. But today we have Andy Graff. We're so privileged to have you with us today. Thank you. And we're going rafting.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend with lots of great reading.